What's up, YouTubers? This is your boy Big Maxwork Fan 12 coming to you with another video. In this video, I will be talking about um, some of the hardest NES games that were released on the console. Now, it's pretty much no secret that the NES is one of the most legendary consoles to be released. One of the main reasons is because Nintendo released the Famicom in Japan in 1984, a year after the video game crash. And then in 1985, they released the NES in 1985 in North America, and pretty much North America and other places. Now, it was pretty much a risky move, that paid off. I believe that during the course of the life cycle of the NES, there have been a lot of games that came out. So a lot of them are classic. Some of them are straight awful, complete turd fest, and some of them are just completely hard. And that's the part I want to focus in on, is because it's pretty much well established that a lot of the games that were released on the NES are hard. Definitely harder than most of the games that's released nowadays for Xbox, PlayStation, and even the like Nintendo Switch and everything. Now, I'm going to mention like 2 specific trilogies and 3 and 5 standalone games that came out from the NES. Let's face it, they're insanely hard. You know what I'm saying? Now, while there's other games that's on the NES that's just as hard as the ones I'm going to mention, like Batman video game, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game, stuff like that. But these games I'm going to mention are hard among gamers and critics. And the first one that comes to mind is a Double Dragon 3. This was made by Acclaim, and one of the reasons why this one is particularly hard is because the enemies you get your butt handed to you by the enemies in the game, and it's kind of like one of the best advice that you can get while playing this game is don't get caught between 2 of the enemies, because you will definitely get your butt handed to you. And it increases your chances of pretty much losing, and it really doesn't help that you have 1 life to begin with, because once you die, you get like a game over just like that. You can be on the first stage, you know what I'm saying? It can happen. So this is like one of the games that's particularly hard. Another one is Zelda 2, the original Elite. Now, Zelda 2 is a pretty good game, but the main reason why this one is particularly hard is because the programmers pretty much put some of the hardest sections in the early part of the game, and it does depend on it is in different villages and everything. Because one thing about it, the programmers could have put those hard stages in the early portion of Zelda 2 into the later sections of the game. Plus, Dark Link is pretty much one of the hardest bosses that to be put in the NES game, which will include like Dracula in the Castlevania game, and Mike Tyson in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and stuff like that. So this Zelda 2 is like a pretty hard game in its own right, you know what I'm saying? Now, the next one I will mention is the Castlevania Trilogy. Now, this is pretty much considered the second hardest trilogy on the NES, because this is like a consistent theme in the trilogy where the further you get in the Castlevania game, regardless if it's 1, 2, or 3, it gets progressively harder. And then there's the fact that there's pretty much cheap enemy placement, and the fact that if you jump near a pit and like a Medusa head hits you, you will pretty much fall in that pit, causing instant death. Now, another thing that comes to mind is pretty much specifically in the Castlevania Castlevania 2, where the gameplay is stopped by the day and night transition through a text box. I'll be honest, the text box part of it is completely unnecessary, you know, in the fact that this is the most cryptic game in the trilogy. So if you supposed to, they expect you to know you're supposed to do something in a particular section or have a particular like orb or crystal or whatever, and they pretty much got real lazy with the bosses though, you know. Plus the in Castlevania 3 is pretty much the hardest game in the trilogy because it has more cheap enemy placement and there's more hazards in this one than the other two Castlevania games. Plus, in Castlevania 3, if you die while fighting Dracula, they'll send you back to the stages instead of them putting you near his lair and everything. That, to me, really doesn't make any sense in that regard. Because I know in the first one, if you die against Dracula, they'll send you they'll have you near his lair. You know what I'm saying? And like when you face Dracula in the first Castlevania game, it's practically an endurance round, and it's no different in Castlevania 3. Now the other game I'm going to mention, which is the second trilogy that I'm going to mention, is the Ninja Gaiden Trilogy, which is considered the hardest trilogy on the NES. Because the thing about it, it has most of the main gripes that people have about the Castlevania Trilogy, like the cheap enemy placement, falling back if you get hit, you know what I'm saying, you end up falling against a pit. But make this one a tad harder than Castlevania Trilogy is the enemies will respond if you don't move forward. And then there's the fact that the Ninja Gaiden Trilogy has hazards that you won't see in the Castlevania trilogy, like the winds changing direction, the ground being slippery, and some of the stages are dark, and you need to have the lightning real flash so you can see where the pits are. So it makes it a tad bit harder than the Castlevania Trilogy in that regard. Plus, Ninja Gaiden 3 has a limited number of continues, even though the first two have unlimited continues. That pretty much adds to the frustration and everything. Now, this other game I'm going to mention is Ghosts and Goblins. Of course, it's not that big of a shot that I would mention Ghosts and Goblins as one of the hardest NES games, mainly because Arthur don't have a health bar like the other games that I mentioned, like Castlevania and Ninja Gaiden, those two and stuff like that. Now with this one, get hit once, you lose your armor. You get hit, you die. It is worth mentioning it has unlimited continues, but at the same time, the only weapon that's worth holding on to is the knife, because you can form at a quicker rate than you would say the fireball, the shield, or the lance. You know what I'm saying? So if anything else, hold on to that. Because it's going to be, the whole game is pretty much an endurance round. Plus, it don't help that you have to beat the game twice to get the true ending. It's like, to me, the programmers who worked on Ghosts and Goblins was probably laughing their butts off when they made this game, you know what I'm saying, because of how insanely hard it is. Another one I'm going to mention is Battletoads, of course. Good game, but it's definitely one of the hardest games on the NES. Pretty much the hardest two-player co-op games to ever be on the NES. Mainly because the programmers put it in where you and another player can hurt each other. What sense does that make? You know, it's probably one of the most pointless programming decisions put in a video game. plus the fact that there's the hoverbike part of the third stage that few gamers have gotten past, and not only that, there's like at least 2 or 3 stages that's similar to the hoverbike section, you know, and pretty much the final game I'm going to mention is Festus Quest. Pretty much like Battletoads, practically one of the hardest games on the NES, mainly because of cheap enemy placement. The enemies will respawn at the drop of a dime, practically worse than Ninja Gaiden in that regard. If you get a particular weapon, if you, it can actually be downgraded to a weaker weapon, which don't make any sense to me. Then there's the fact that a lot of the enemies take like far too many hits to get killed. But if you get hit twice, you're dead, and you get a pretty much a game over. You know what I'm saying? Making it one of the toughest games on the NES. One thing I forgot to mention about Battletoads is that if during the 2-player co-op mode, if one person dies, it's game over for both. Why would they even do that? You know what I'm saying? Now, with that being said, if you want to mention other games on the NES that's like insanely hard, you could mention them and the reasons why you say that these other games are hard. Totally fine by me. If you like my video about these 7 games that I mentioned, don't hesitate to click that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe. This is your boy Big Metroid Fan 12 signing off.